Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Kris Ashley, and I'm excited today. We're going to actually talk about something a little different. I know we usually talk about personal development, spirituality, and science, and this kind of fits in that realm. We're going to talk about paranormal experiences, which is something that I love geeking out about. I've had a lot of personal experience with, so it should be a fun episode. First, couple quick announcements. If you head over to the links in the show notes, you'll be able to find access to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by 3 experts from the film The Secret, John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and 10 other amazing individuals in the personal development and spirituality space. You'll also find a bunch of freebies, my courses, my coaching. So go check it out, become part of the community, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Hi, I'm Kris. When I was younger, I went through trauma that caused me to feel broken and lost. But my life changed after I had a spiritual awakening. Since then, I've dedicated my life to studying and learning from masters all around the world that have helped me to create a life of fulfillment and abundance beyond my wildest dreams. Now I'm dedicated to sharing everything I've learned so that you don't have to suffer for decades like I did. I've seen people's lives completely transformed, and I share it all right here. All right, so I'm excited. With me today, I have Rye Voss. So Rye is the co-host of the podcast, The Lost Frequency. Rye grew up having numerous experiences with the paranormal, from a late-night encounter with a shadow person to ghostly encounters while working in his basement. Because of this, Rye pursued a path in the realm of shamanism, meeting native elders who guided him on his path and taught him the ways to deal with these entities. Rye also has been able to navigate the dreamverse, which includes dreams of the future that are so eerily spot on, he never ceases to amaze. Now the co-host of the Lost Frequency podcast, he takes you on a journey through the unknown, exploring paranormal encounters, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, strange occurrences, conspiracy theories. Rye's unique perspective adds depth and intrigue to every discussion. All right, I'm excited for the depth and intrigue. Welcome, Rye. I'm happy you're here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be on board.
Yeah. So, I start all my episodes the same way, and that is by asking my guests what their origin story is. I love origin stories, and it helps the audience connect with you. And it shows us why you're on this path. So, where did this all start for you?
Okay, so the best I can recall for my origin story would be this one specific house that I grew up in. This house was a hot spot for paranormal activity, like I was kind of saying, and that is what directed me onto this path. Now, there was numerous things that I saw growing up, like. And I'll jump into them right away because it all ties in with this origin story. So when I was growing up, we lived on an acreage on the small farm, and we built the house. It wasn't like this was an old house that had been sitting there for ages and had things going on to it. No, my parents built this house, and I grew up there. Now, some of the earliest things that I recall happening was I was late night working on a computer, and my one of my responsibilities was to feed the horses. Now, and I'm very absent-minded, so my father would always have to remind me, "Right, did you go feed the horses?" I'm like, no. And so I'm like, okay. And while I was working on the computer, I was typing up my journal, my diary of sorts, and I didn't want anybody to read my words or my inside thoughts. So I went outside, and as I'm outside, I look back up into this dormer where the computer was sitting, and clear as day, I can see my grandma sitting there. Okay, but my grandma is still alive at this time, but what I saw was my grandma sitting at the computer, which was really confusing because first of all, she's not there at the house, and secondly, like, why is my grandma here?
And why is she reading your diary?
Yeah. Why is she reading this? And so I'm in a upset, I'm in a huffle, and I go down, feed the horses, and I come back to and my sisters and my mom and dad were all on the main floor watching some awards TV show. I don't know which one it was at that time. Could have been the Grammys. I don't know. And I'm like, who was upstairs? Someone was upstairs reading my innermost thoughts, and they're like, no, we've all been down here watching TV. I'm like, no, 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 no. And of course I'm not going to say I saw my grandma, but I'm like, no, someone is upstairs and on the computer. They're like, right, no, everybody's been here. Like, we swear that everybody's been here. And that was the start of something's not right. And of course, as a critical thinker, you're like, my mind is just playing tricks on me. Then you disregard it, and you're like, that can't be what it was. So life goes on. There was a couple of other more inconsequential kind of things that have happened at that house, but the biggest cumulative event was when I was about the age of 19 years old. And I was out with my friends, and I wasn't drinking or nothing like that. We are just hanging out, and they had dropped me off. And I remember standing outside and seeing the Northern Lights, because the Northern Lights were out, and it was a beautiful moment. So I'm just sitting there in awe watching these. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful, but I have to be up early in the morning to work. So go to bed. And I'm sure we've all experienced this where, you look at the clock and you're like, well, if I get to sleep now, I'm going to have like 7 hours and 36 minutes of sleep.
Totally.
And yeah. So, and I'm like, okay, well, at that age, I want 8 or 9, but of course I'll deal with what I got. But I couldn't fall asleep, and I'm tossing and turning, and it's like, well, 7 hours, 7 hours of sleep. Okay, 6 hours and 40 minutes of sleep. I just could not fall asleep. And at one moment, I turned onto my back and I'm looking straight up, and floating above me, about 2 to 3 feet above me, was this. And this is when I say the shadow being, the shadow figure. I could see a head. I could see the shoulders. I could see where it went down to the waist. I could see where the arms were, but I didn't really see any hands. And this was blacker than black. So when you're looking out, it's at black. It's just kind of sucking in any type of light. So you can still see this form, because of course it's dark in the bedroom, but all I see is this blacker than black figure. Around the waist, it went off into this like white, smoky, wispy kind of thing. So it did change colors.
That's
And
terrifying. Were you absolutely scared?
I was terrified, but that
Yeah.
isn't the scariest part. The scariest part was the eyes. So the eyes were glowing red. It wasn't like the whole eye. It was like the cornea, the pupil were a glowing red. And as you said, yeah, I was terrified, and I was the expression scared stiff. I'm just laying there, not moving, staring up at this, whatever it is. 17, 18-year old, or 19, staring up at this thing floating above me. Now, the length of time, I don't know how long it was there for. I'm going to say about 2 to 3 seconds. How long I stayed there after, that's a mystery to me, because all I remember was this thing disappearing, and I laid there and I did not move, and then I woke up in the morning. So it wasn't like it was a dream or anything like that. I don't know how long I remained motionless in this position, unable to move. But yeah, that was like the terrifying experience that I had at this house.
That is so scary. I can't even imagine. I mean, like, I know that feeling where you're so terrified you can't move. It's literally like fight, flight, or freeze, and you just freeze, and you can't, like, nothing, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. It was, fight, uh, fight, flight, or freeze, and it was freeze for me. How do you fight it? And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not flight. I'm not running out of there. I'm staying still. Maybe it's not going to see me if I don't move. I don't know. It was. Um,
Wow. So did you feel like energy coming off of it or anything? Like, did it feel evil, or was it just
yes,
like such
yes,
a,
yes, yes. It was definitely like this negative, evil feeling, and I am
yeah.
not moving because I am absolutely terrified. And from what I learned is, like, certain entities will feed off your fear. So of course, the more you give, the more they're going to, like, okay, I'm going to come back. Um, yeah,
Hell no.
terrifying. E- e-
So wait, can I ask, going back to grandma, did you ever figure out like how grandma got in your top floor? Like, I was expecting you to say something like, "Oh, I found out she died that night," or something.
No, no, there was nothing. Like, my grandma lived for many, many years after that. Like, I would say, like 15. 15 more years after that. There was never anything. My only guess of this is perhaps whatever it was there was able to think, like, to read my mind and pick a shape or form that maybe to me wasn't frightening. So
Mm.
that, I think, was something else. That I don't think was what was floating above my bed. I believe that was something else in the vicinity. Like, if it's not appearing as something that is frightful or fearful, then it's not meant there. It's not being there to scare you, which
Do,
is
do you know what
different.
that reminds me of? So are you familiar with Dolores Cannon?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, so she comes up in like all my episodes because I just like geek out about her. But she wrote a bunch of books about UFO abductions specifically, and I'm sure you've seen this movie. But have you seen The Fourth Kind? That true story about Nome, Alaska?
I have not actually seen that one.
Oh my gosh, that movie like messed with me so bad. So the whole idea is there's this woman and she's living in Nome, Alaska, and it's really out in the middle of nowhere, and she has this like, or her daughter gets like taken eventually, but it the way it's filmed, it's almost like a Blair Witch Project kind of thing, where it switches between like a regular movie and then these flashbacks of like real footage supposedly of her in therapy under hypnosis trying to like fill in these missing time chunks like leading up to this. And before she like has these missing chunks, she's always like, I see an owl. There's like an owl in my window. And then she's like, oh my God, it's not an owl. And then, and then like at one point during the hypnosis, she's like levitating and her back kind of like cracks and it's crazy. I don't
Wow.
know. I watched it with my husband. He's like, this is bullshit. This is so fake. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, like it's a true story.
Yeah.
But what was crazy is when I read some of Dolores Cannon's books after, and I can't remember which ones are about UFO. It's like Keepers of the Garden and The Custodians are the two.
Okay. Yes. Yes. I've
But
heard of the
but
custodians.
in those, and this is why it's relevant to what you just said, they're saying like these aliens, I guess, will appear to people often in forms that they feel comfortable with and safe with, and often as animals and often as owls specifically. So people would remember stopping their car, seeing like a big owl or a big animal, and then they lose chunks of time. And then under hypnosis, when Dolores took them under, they realized that it wasn't actually an owl. It was this, this wizard from another dimension, or this alien, or they're being taken onto the ship. But it's so interesting that they made us see that it was like these animals that they're comfortable with. And it totally just reminded me of your grandma story, right? It's like something that you're comfortable with, that you're not going to be afraid of. It's like a mirage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very, very interesting. It's like they access your thoughts, and you're like, oh, you're okay with an owl or like a dog or your grandma, because I was pretty close with my grandma, and it's kind of like, hey, we're going to do something so it's not frightening. That's very interesting. And we have interviewed a bunch of alien abductees, and there is a lot of similarities. Now, like I understand where you're coming with this one, and I'm like, was it possibly an alien type being? I don't know. Could it have been? Maybe, which is really interesting. Very interesting. And that's what we like to do. We like to hear, other people's takes. It's kind of like, we don't really know. We're just trying to piece things together and to try to come up with some sort of answer of sorts, and that's exactly, and that's fantastic. I really appreciate your insight on that.
I mean, I love geeking out about this stuff. It's so fascinating. And just to go off on more of a Dolores rant, her books made me absolutely not terrified of ever getting abducted by an alien, because oftentimes under those hypnosis sessions, they found that the person getting abducted, first of all, agreed to this, right? Like way before they incarnated. B, oftentimes that's like their original soul family, and they had volunteered to come here, and these beings, these aliens, are helping them from that side, right? So they'll give them upgrades, they'll install technology that will prepare them, they'll help them for whatever challenges they know that are coming. And it comes from this place of like love and protection and caring. So I was like, that's such an interesting way of looking at it. So I'm curious, like you said, you've had abductees on your podcast. Have you ever
Yeah.
had anyone have a
Both
positive
sides.
experience like that? Okay.
Both sides. And
Yeah,
it's
tell me about it.
very unique that we had one interview where this gentleman, he talks about multiple, and we're actually calling it, it hasn't been released yet. It'll be very soon. We call it like the generational because just recently him and his son were taken on board a craft. Uh, and they're really, it's really general, like, it's really nice. He has really good experiences, and the first one he had when he was 8 years old, I believe 8 years old, and there was a bunch of grays around him, and of course, terrified him. But he's like he recounts multiple times being abducted and also being like phasing through walls, like literally floating, levitating, and moving through walls, as then he goes up into these ships.
Super
Uh
cool.
Yes, and he says as he was passing through the walls, he could taste like the plaster. He could taste the wood. He says, but
Mhm.
he's like, "How am I gonna?" And then, of course, it just goes through. And then he was underneath the tree, and then he was going up through the tree to the craft. It was super, super amazing. And then he talks about being in a craft and be handed a baby, and he came to the realization that he was partially the father of this baby, this hybrid. And he goes into depths about hybrids. He actually really, and it really, this whole experience really changed his life. He used to be like a gangster rapper. Now he is like, he calls it high vibrational spiritual pop art. No, I don't want to say pop, but kind of like an artist of sorts. And he has these really cool songs now, and we're going to be featuring one of them on our. And he has a documentary too coming up, and it's amazing. And so I had that interview, and I know I talk about dreams. So that night I had a dream where I was working in a military hospital, and this is the important part was I wasn't sure if it was top secret or not, if it was like high security. And that was one thing where I was like, it was, but it wasn't. Now there was a baby. I was helping with the delivery of this baby. The baby was possessed by a specific name of a demon, and I'm not going to mention that name on here. But it was this. Now
No
that
bad
was on.
energies.
What? Sorry.
I said, yeah, no bad energies getting summoned.
Exactly, exactly. So that was Tuesday night. Thursday night, we have another interview with this other girl who talks about her abduction experiences. And her abduction experiences are the complete inverse of his, where she was terrified and she could feel like incisions, and it was terrifying. She continues to tell me that she was born on a military base that was Nellis military base, which is associated with Area 51. So it's in the area of Area 51. Now, now we go back to my dream where I've had this dream where I'm helping deliver a baby who is in this top secret military base. Was it top secret? I don't know. That's where she was born. Then she goes on to talk about a dark time in her life where she was trying to summon a demon, and it was this specific name. And in my dream, this person was possessed by this demon, and it was a very specific name, and I had trouble saying it in my dream. And she was telling me that during this ceremony of sorts, she had trouble saying the name because she wanted to make sure she said it right. So it was, and this was like a day and a half, 2 days before this actual interview. So I find it that was fascinating.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's super, super wild.
Yeah.
So do you think that when she was taken, or does she think when she was taken that it was a group of, extraterrestrials that maybe didn't have her best interest in mind? Or do you think that she was just so scared because she didn't understand what was happening?
That is a fantastic question. Of course, I don't know, but my guess was it wasn't the best interest in mind. And it definitely could be that, maybe in the future there were other abductions, but because of this experience, like there are other abductions we haven't gotten into. We're actually going to be doing like a multi-part series on this. Um, but I feel that because of the first initial one, that it terrified her. And from then on, any type of experience is already jaded as this negative. I don't want this, even though it could be for her highest interest. Maybe there are ones that are helping her. but she's fighting it now because of this negativity that occurred during that first initial abduction.
Yeah, totally. So, this other I don't know if you've ever read DMT, The Spirit Molecule, but I was
My
literally just
co-host has. My co-host has, and he
okay.
swears by it. Yeah.
It's such a good book, but I was literally just talking to my father-in-law about DMT the other day. And it just makes me think that some people claim that when people think they're getting abducted by aliens, it's also this premature release of DMT in their brain. So I was just curious what your thoughts on that are. Like, I don't know if I believe that necessarily because I believe in aliens, but I
Yeah.
mean, aliens are real. Like, come on.
Of
There's
course.
no
Of course.
believing or not believing at this point. But,
Yes.
I always thought that was kind of interesting.
Now, you're believing that possibly that the aliens are triggering some sort of endorphin, like a dopamine kind of hit to make it feel good. Is that maybe what you're saying, or?
Oh no, I didn't even think about that. No, and just I've just heard people say that, you know, when people claim that they're being abducted by aliens, what's
Yeah.
actually happening is their brain is prematurely releasing DMT. Because our brain releases DMT when we are born, when we die, right? It's
Hmm.
naturally in our brain. And if you read that book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, like so many people went to other dimensions and interacted with other beings and I don't think that that's just a hallucination. Like I believe it's like a portal of some sort.
I
But yeah, I don't know.
totally,
It
yeah.
was only in my head just because I just had that conversation about
Oh,
DMT the other day.
oh, that's fantastic. That is super interesting. Maybe it's like it's something that I need to look into more because all about these portals and things like that. That's something that comes up greatly in our show. Like I believe that there are other dimensions that we're closely tied in. I call it like we're in a nesting doll type of situation. That's what I believe, and that these other dimensions or worlds are one on top of the other. It's not like we're across all this space, we got to go like 500 light years. No, I actually believe that we're on top of one another, and there's areas where the veil is thin, and that's where we get a lot of these crossovers. There's certain areas that are like high interactions where things are happening, such as like the Bermuda Triangle. Oh, all this stuff happens. Well, of course, there's certain areas that we really notice in the cryptid communities, like the LBL, the Sierra Mountains. That there's these areas that have high activity. That's the word I was looking for. High activity, and it's just that I believe that there are these areas where it's thin, and these portals are opening, and things are coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they say creatures like Bigfoot are actually interdimensional beings, right? Where they can like go between dimensions. Okay, so
I
where do we
totally
go?
got. Yeah, we got totally off topic on that one, but that is fine. Yeah, I'll circle back to my origin story, and
Yeah.
how I gone on to this. So yeah, that was the experience, and then I had another experience where I didn't see anything, but we're just talking about fear, and believe fear is such a big driver in these. Where I had come home, it was about a year and a half later. I come home from work, and I was about 20, still living at home with my parents. It was just me and my parents, and I started feeling sick, and so I went into the bathroom, and I had spent like an hour in the bathroom, not well at all. But it had built up to the point that like I was feeling sick, but all of a sudden this fear started, and I was so terrified. I'm like 20 years old, and I was so terrified I couldn't leave the bathroom. I was like this. I've never had this kind of fear ever before, to the point that I was screaming out for my mom to come and get me. And it was like just this fear. And now, of course, in my mind, I'm seeing things that are like I get this picture of actually like this vampire of sorts, and I still remember it was kind of like a Nosferatu type of vampire, like bald and not like these I don't know, Twilight type vampires and things like that. But this is the fear that was in my mind, and like I said, 20 years old man, terrified, screaming for his mom to come and get him. Of course, when she came, I'm not saying that, oh, I was scared. I was like, oh, I'm not feeling well. But when she came and she turned on the lights, everything seemed to be better. But it was like it instantly went away. But Of course, that's just an anecdotal kind of thing. That is kind of like a strange thing, but that's the fear again. And this fear is what drove me on my path then to start seeking out ways to help myself so I wouldn't have this fear anymore. And that's what started me into Reiki. One of the things that started me into Reiki was not being afraid anymore and to really understand what's on this other side and to start understanding energy, because I believe energy is huge. You need to feel the energy to know if something is good, to know if something is bad. Because I think you had said that before. Like, what kind of feeling did you get? Was it negative or positive? And that's where the Reiki started. So I took my first degree of Reiki, and that brings up a really interesting story when you're talking about The Secret. I know you said you had you had 3 people from The Secret endorsing your book. I actually have a fantastic story to kind of talk in with that, with the manifestation. You know, if you focus on something and you believe you're going to have it, it's going to happen. Now,
Oh yeah.
at that time, I was taking my first degree Reiki. My Reiki master was originally what was from Costa Rica, and I was like, you know what? I want to go visit her. When I finished my course, I want to go visit her in Costa Rica, maybe taking my second degree with her. And I had gone out with some friends that night, and we're all sitting around the table, and we're like, "Yeah, we should go somewhere." And I said, "Yeah, let's go. I want to go to Costa Rica." And they're like, "No, no, let's go to Mexico," which is funny because that's where I live now. But and I'm like, at that point, I'm like, no, no, I've been to Mexico a bunch of times. I'm going to Costa Rica. And that was the key thing. It said, I'm going to Costa Rica. And that at the end of the night, you know, I went home and I'm like, I don't know how. I had just gone through a divorce. I didn't have any money. I didn't have the means, but I was like, I'm going to Costa Rica. So I was attending a sweat lodge 2 weeks later to the day. And at the sweat lodge, after I finished the lodge, I come out and I went to my truck and grabbed my phone, and I get an email. And the subject line is Costa Rica. And I'm like, okay, what is this? You know, I'm like, and I look in, and it's a client of mine because I used to have my own construction business years ago, and he had sought me out and said, "Listen, I've moved to Costa Rica. I need someone to come and do some quality work for us in Costa Rica." And now he's like, "I don't know if you'd be open to this, but I'll pay for your flight, your food, your accommodation. I'll pay for everything. You just come down and do the work for me." And then you kind of like, you organize it, you kind of like order everything that needs to be ordered, but I'll pay for everything, and you can have a free vacation to Costa Rica.
Amazing. Can I just pause for a second there and just say, listeners, like, this is manifesting in action. You absolutely manifested that. That's amazing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I was like, okay. And so I ended up going twice to Costa Rica, all expenses paid, you know, and it was fantastic. So that was my father-in-law. Now that, you know, I'm married now, and my father-in-law always says, you know, the magical life of Rye. I have all these crazy manifesting experiences, and that's just like one of them. You know, another one would be, I walked out. I was like, you know what? I'm going to find the largest feather I've ever found before. That's what my goal is. I'm going to find this feather. So as I walk out, I look up in the sky, and it's all about paying attention and recognizing, you know, these signs, these gifts. And I look up in the sky, and no word of a lie, and I'll send you this picture after, is a huge feather in the sky. It is like word for word a white huge feather in the sky. And I was like, okay, that's not really what I had in mind, but I didn't really, I wasn't specific on what I wanted. I just said the biggest feather I've ever found before. And sure enough, there floating above me was this feather in the sky. So
Was it a
I took
cloud?
it was a cloud. Yeah.
Okay. That's funny.
Yeah, it was the trails from a plane. I don't know if what you think about that, but it was a trail from the plane, and then it was all spreading out, and it was a perfect feather. It was a perfect feather. And I was like, okay, well, there we go.
And that is why I teach my clients to be specific. um,
Exactly.
so I'm curious, what did you learn from Reiki? What did you learn from this native medicine woman that made you feel more comfortable and able to get past the fear so that you can really investigate all this?
Okay, so going back to Reiki. So Reiki was just understanding and using energy, right? It was it's not like I have the energy. I'm just I'm taking it and passing it on, just a conduit. And you can feel the energy going in, and you start to really. And it was also like we all have this ability to feel the energy. It's like a muscle. Do you exercise it? Most people don't. It's all about recognizing those things as well, those signs that we're given. Do most people exercise that ability to notice these signs for what they are, or are we just oblivious to it all? And that's what's happened. So it's kind of like stop and start to pay attention and start to feel what is really there. And so that is what I was. It opened up that door to start feeling these energies and start allowing them to pass through you. And that was the bottom line with Reiki for me. I ended up finishing and getting my master. I'm a Reiki master now, but I never really used that as I didn't ever used it any other way other than just Reiki shares, but it was actually just understanding that energy. Now, back to my first degree of Reiki, there was the Reiki master who was teaching everyone, but there was an assistant who was helping her. And this lady was a shaman. And this shaman, and I was very drawn to her. And like not in like anything like that, but it was just like this energy. I'm like, she had this calming, great energy. And I'm like, I need to know more. I need to learn more from her. And she approached me one night when we're doing our classes, and she's like, Rye, I really feel that you should be learning from me. And she never approached anybody else but me. And she's like, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I'm just saying that I had this drawn to her, and it wasn't that she was going to everybody saying the same kind of thing. And so I was like, yeah, I feel that too. So for the next year, I would about once a week, sometimes once every 2 weeks, I would be learning underneath her, like learning from her. And she was teaching me ways of like drum meditation, medicine wheels, and just clearing locations and removing negative energy is kind of what it ended up turning into. And finding your own place and connecting with Mother Earth, and it was that connection. And I really felt connected at that point, and it was traversing to the upper worlds and to the lower worlds. And that doesn't mean like lower worlds are negative or bad or anything like that. No, it's all about journeying. And on these journeys, it could be finding parts of your lost soul shards, helping others find their soul shards as well. So that's where it started to go, and it served its purpose. That was for about a year. Now, in that time as well, I met up with another woman, and she was running a sweat lodge. And she was a medicine one. And so the first lady, she was teaching me the ways of the Cherokee. I say shamanism, but shamanism, of course, is directly related to Russia. That is like their that terminology comes from there. But it's kind of like been kind of a universal term that we just use to describe what they're doing. But this lady who was running Sweat Lodge, she was more of a medicine woman. She was using medicines to treat people, and they're natural medicines, whether it be so she also did Reiki as well. And it was just using like everything that Mother Earth could provide to help heal other people. And so we ended up building a great relationship, and she ended up kind of mentoring me, unofficially mentoring me. And so I would constantly be helping her with her sweat lodge. I helped her build her sweat lodge a couple of times. And that was very interesting, very insightful too for myself. Like I was being challenged. There was an issue where it was running really, really late, and I was being challenged that like I need to stop worrying about time and just be in the moment and stop worrying about where I have to be the next day. But yes.
Plus, I bet as like a former contractor, building in this new way was kind of interesting for you too, right?
it was very interesting, yeah, because you're using willow, and there are some large willow pieces that you're having to bend and form them, and you're using your back and your legs. And a lot of times, being working in construction, you're using like it's really about brute strength, but this was more technique. Like she was able to do some of the stuff that I was having issues with because it's all about technique. And it's kind of like, hey, you need to step back, take a breath, and watch and learn exactly how to do this. So yeah, so it's about weaving these willows into the sweat lodge, and it becomes like a nice hut, a nice dome, and then covering it. And then we had a lodge after too, which was fantastic.
That's super, super cool. What an amazing experience for you that you got to study with all these incredible people for a year.
Years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The first one was a year, but with Joanne, it was a couple of years, and then even then, like her and I have, I call her my second mother. You know, she what was just amazing. You know, and she would guide me on many things, like like kind of give me these nudges in these directions, like perhaps maybe you should go here, or maybe you should do this. And it's never like you need to do this, which I always find. Off-putting when people are like, you need to do this. No, it's kind of like, perhaps you should do this, or perhaps you should walk this way, walk this path. And it opened up a lot of doors, and I experienced a lot of things because of that. And I'll, to this day, like she's come and visited us here in Mexico, and just an amazing woman.
That's really, really cool. Super special.
Yeah.
So after you studied with her and learned all the Reiki, like have you had paranormal experiences? And if so, did you approach them differently after learning all about this?
Extremely differently.
Tell me about
I
that.
would say there was like next to no fear anymore. The fear was gone because it was more fear of the unknown. But if you're not giving the fear out, those things that are going to be feeding on the fear aren't going to be there anymore. And it's really noticeable. Like one experience was I was working in the house of my in my basement, and there was a man working behind me who wasn't there. It was the man who had built the house originally. Like that was my guess on it, because he was dressed from the 70s. Like I can completely describe it. He looked like something like Alec Baldwin from Beetlejuice, mixed with the scientist from Stargate. It was kind of like this mixture, and like sandy blonde hair, kind of like long hanging down. He had wire rimmed glasses, like big 1970s glasses on. He had a plaid shirt on, and it was tucked in. He had his jeans kind of pulled up a little bit higher. They were kind of more of a lighter denim color. And he was a carpenter. He was working behind me. And I looked back and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I got some extra hands helping me out while I'm finishing the basement here. So, and that's one thing they say, is that when you renovate or take apart like a certain house, you kind of will stir up the energies and cause things to kind of happen more. And so that was my guess, was, well, I guess he's back working again. And that, though, I call more of a residual haunting. And I don't mean, I don't like using the word haunting, because it wasn't really haunting, but it was residual, means like their energy is still left there from the work that they have done. It wasn't like that he was actually there. But
So,
yeah.
so that's actually exactly what I was just going to ask you. Like, what's your take on ghosts? Like, are they just souls that didn't walk towards the light because they don't know that they're dead yet and they're kind of stuck here for a period until they figure it out? Or are they echoes of something, or residual, like you said? Or is it all the above and other things?
It's all the above.
Okay.
Yes, it is exactly all the above. So if you're at a place that requires a lot of energy, a lot of, sometimes it's trauma as well. Like energy can be trauma. It can be good things as well. So perhaps you've lived at this house, you love this house, and you just invested so much of your energy into it. Maybe you were building it yourself. You're going to partially leave your imprint on there. And that's what it is. It's like an imprint that just keeps repeating and repeating. Sometimes it can be stirred up so that it could be more visible, like this situation was. Or other times it can be just, just this continual ghostly figure walking down the hallway. And that's all it is. It isn't actually the ghost. It's just this energy that is just kind of imprinted on this area. Kind of like if you ever played a video game, some people who have played video games, where they play one specific video game for way too long, it burns into the TV. So when you turn off the TV, or even if you're watching something else, you'll still see like, oh, this is where my life meter is, and this is like the energy I have, or something like that. It will burn in. That's exactly what this is. It's kind of like burning into our reality. And time doesn't mean anything to it, because time in that realm doesn't exist. Now, the ghosts that you had said that don't know they're dead, this is exactly it. They stuck around, they don't know, or they or they know they're dead and they just haven't passed over and they need that extra push. Now, there's definitely some mediums who will help with that. As for myself, I can assist on that one, but that is a lot more work. I can move them out of the location. Not necessarily, and I can try to help them move on, but there are more adept people for helping them to move on. Definitely mediums would be, of course, that would be that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I grew up starting at age 16, spending my summers in Estes Park, Colorado. Our family friends owned this amazing old guest ranch there. Has the oldest schoolhouse in Colorado on it, the oldest church. And it's funny, it was in Estes Park, which is the same town that the Stanley Hotel where they filmed The Shining was.
Oh,
We went on
yeah.
their ghost tours. We're like, we've got way more ghost stories. But there was this ghost there, and her name is. There's a few. So I've had a lot of experience with ghosts myself. But the main one was this woman named Eleanor James. She grew up on the lot at the lodge. Like we know, I actually own a book that she used to own, and like her name is written inside of it.
Cool.
But she would play pranks on people. She would, I don't know, like one time we were cooking donuts in the kitchen and like all the donuts like disappeared out of the fryer for like several minutes and then they reappeared. Or like she loved the horses. So she would walk out in the snow and open the gate and let all the horses out. And we would see this old woman walking to the barn. And we're like, what's going on? And then the horses would be up. There'd be no footprints in the snow. And she would be dressed like the time air. And like, there's so many stories. So like, what was that? Is that just she loved it so much there and she just wants to mess with us? Because she was like such a like there was no fear around when Eleanor was around, right? It was just like she was such an ambivalent spirit, but she was really playful.
That is awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
definitely the ones who, they loved it so much here, they just didn't want to go on, and they are more than happy to be here. Of course, yes, and that what you're talking about, that disappearing, like the vanishing of something and then bringing it back, that is definitely like it's like they're taking it into another dimension and then reappearing it back. And that happened at that house that I grew up in as well. It actually happened to my dad. He had an experience like that. So yeah, there are some mischievous ones, and they're just enjoying it. There are definitely the good ones, and who help actually to protect you. They help you, and they'll keep other negative spirits at bay and keep them away.
That's so true. Because the other thing is like anytime a horse was going to be injured or sick, it was like we would see her at the barn. Like she would, it was almost like she was warning us. But it was funny though. It was like a guest ranch, so guests would come and stay. And at one time, we were sitting out in the front porch, and all of a sudden, this adult man, probably in his like mid 40s to 50s, runs down the stairs, soaking wet, like wrapped in a sheet. He had been in the shower. He was totally naked under it. He had been in the shower and the door kept opening and shutting and the lights were turning on and off. And he just got so freaked out. He like grabbed the sheets off the bed and ran down. And we're like, oh yeah, this is Eleanor.
It's just messing with you. No
Yeah.
worries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's yeah. So definitely there is that, and then there's definitely the other side to this, like the poltergeist side to this.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned though, poltergeists weren't a person. They are created from a person. And I don't know if you ever heard that before.
Oh,
So
tell me.
poltergeist is this immense energy that is bottled up within a person that starts acting out. Okay, so start things. And my co-host, he had his stepsister. Only things would happen whenever she came into the house, so she wasn't staying with them all the time, but whenever she did, things were happening. It wasn't like they're consciously doing this, they want this negativity to happen. It is, they have so much of an emotional scar that they're causing things to happen. And what eventually it happens is it does end up becoming an entity upon itself by disembarking from that person. They put so much energy and so much of this anxiousness, this fear, the sadness into it, that it actually becomes something that will remove itself from the person and then begin acting upon itself, and creating all the stuff. And this that happened actually with my ex-wife. There was a poltergeist attachment to her, and there was, when in the house that I lived with her, we had not doors, but like the light going on and off, and the fan going on and off. Usually around anywhere between 2 to 3 or 4 in the morning, this would happen. You're sleeping, and all of a sudden it starts happening. This was going on for 6 months, to the point that I literally thought I was losing my mind. And this is before I did all my Reiki and everything else. So at that point, I feel I was open to experiencing all this, but I still at that point didn't know what to do with it. But it was absolutely terrifying. And like I said, I thought I was losing my mind. And I felt like I'm going to go insane. It was just absolutely crazy.
So that's super scary for the person too. Like, is it only when they're in a certain space, or does it follow them around? And then like, how do you get rid of that?
That is great. That's something that is going to be, and like that, you might actually even need a priest to exorcise that demon, because it creates into a demon. It becomes something else. Now it will follow them around. If it's still attached to them, it's going to follow them around. But after it becomes one unto itself, like becomes a being unto itself, then it can possibly leave. Of course, it wants to stay with, to be feeding off of that person, because that person created it. It fed it all this, these emotions, these feelings, and it, of course, it's usually going to stay near them. But it might find a place and just hang out at a place, start terrorizing the people that live in that place. After we moved out, I don't know if this thing followed my ex or if it stayed. So interesting.
Yeah, that's super scary. So it starts with a person just having all of these really low vibration emotions, maybe fear,
Yes.
maybe sadness, and it's just that they're so wrapped up in that it just creates.
Yeah, and
That's just wild.
it is, and it's sad. It's kind of like
Yeah.
I feel sorry for these, and a lot of times, and it happens with young women who are going through puberty, and that's because they have so much of that emotions, so much emotion that they actually created. That is kind of one of the things where it happens. It's kind of like that's why you need someone to be able to talk to deal with, and it's this kind of that seems to be. It's not saying that boys or men or women can't create these things as well, but that is where it first starts out.
Wow.
Not first starts out, sorry. That is the most like common place and person that it will manifest from. So
As
be
if
careful with that
young
manifesting.
Yeah, as if young women going through puberty don't have enough shit to deal with, right? It's like,
Exactly,
now you're creating a
exactly.
poltergeist
Yeah,
with
now
all
you're
your
creating a
hormones.
poltergeist. There's a chance it can happen. I'm not saying it's going to, but there's a chance that can happen. More common, yes.
So speaking of feeling bad, like, I mean, I even feel bad for Eleanor, the ghost that loves it there. Cause it's like, does that mean that she just hasn't been able to move on? Or, I mean, it seems like a choice, but
From
I mean, yeah.
I definitely think it's from a choice. Sometimes they get there so long that they're kind of blinded to the next step. They don't know, like they're so attached to that. Perhaps she's ready to move on, and you would need at that time you would need assistance. You would need a medium to help that entity or Eleanor move on, and you'd be like, you have to actually inform them that go to the white light. Everybody is waiting for you there. It's time. It's your time to move on. Now, would she be ready? That's up. That will still be her decision. Nah, and it might not happen.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is kind of my origin story of everything that kind of went, and so from that point on, it was I would do house cleansings, I would do land blessings. Yeah, it's just constantly learning. I would say in the last couple of years, I have stepped back from it a little bit. I've just been so busy with everything that's going here that I've stepped back, though I've been getting a lot of signs that I need to be paying attention to, because they're going to kick me in the butt sooner or later if I don't take action on them. But it's time to start stepping back into that role again.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we could talk about this forever. It's crazy that an hour has gone by.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yes.
So, do you have anything you want to like leave listeners with? Any kind of message? Any kind of final thoughts?
Ugh. My message is, trust your gut. One thing is always trust your gut. People are like, "Oh, I got a bad feeling." Well, you have a bad feeling for a reason, and we all have those extra gifts. We all have them. And we need to exercise them. So start exercising them. Trust your gut and what it says. As for people who have experienced these things, especially with this latest one that I was talking about, where she's had such negative experiences, I gave her a message, and because she was like, well, a lot of people just want to hear my abduction story, and then that's it, and then they move on. And I said, well, there's something you need to know, is like, I am still here. Like, you yourself, you have to say that I'm still here. So my story, this is my story. But she's like, it's almost like these people are like groupies of sort. They're like, oh, I got this, now I'm moving on to the next one. Or like these energy seekers, it's like, I got this, now I'm going to move on. But they forget that the person is still there. The person is still dealing with this and still experiencing these traumas. So you need to find someone who you can talk to, release that, and try to deal with it. And we're all still here, and we're all part of this. We're all there. We're not this instant. And that's the thing with this instant gratification. That's what our world has come into, this instant gratification, these TikTok 10-second videos, move on, 10-second video, move on. But, these people are still living their lives. These experiences have transformed them, and they're still there. I guess that's all I can go with.
Yeah, totally. And it just made me think, I know we're getting close to time, but
Yeah.
do you think that it almost feels like there's an acceleration happening, like things are more rapid, right? Like more and more people are having these experiences. Do you think it's building towards something? And then also the fact that the government strangely already are now leaking things, and we're like, yeah, we knew
No,
there were aliens, right? Like, it's just, which feels like they're trying to distract us from something else, which is a whole other conversation. But do you feel like there's going to be some, especially when it comes to UFOs, some unveiling happening soon, or we're going to have contact, or
I
contact
totally
known to the
believe.
public anyway?
Yeah, I totally believe. So I'm a big fan of Art Bell. Back from the 90s, Art Bell was Coast to Coast, and he used to talk about something called the quickening. And that's what I feel. It's kind of like going in waves. I feel in the 90s, we're having the quickening. Then around the 2000s, early 2000s, it kind of slowed down a little bit, but now it's picking back up again. And I believe that, yeah, disclosure is happening, but I believe there's an underhand reason why they're releasing all this, because I believe that we are going to be contacted. There's a little thing that's called Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam was supposed to be like this fake psyop of an alien invasion, and I believe that the government is going to pretend that this alien invasion, this negative thing, but I actually believe it's going to be this positive thing. So they're wanting you to have all this fear and to think that these aliens are bad, when in fact they're actually coming in to help. And one of our previous guests, maybe you'd be very interested in, Mary Rodwell. She talks about this galactic family and this Federation of Light, and it's very fascinating, very interesting.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say that there's like a galactic federation that have just been waiting for us to mature enough, right?
Waiting, yes, exactly.
And maybe, I don't know if we're there yet, but maybe we're getting closer. But no, I totally agree with you. It feels like there's something. It's almost like a magic trick, right? Like they're like, hey, look at this, while we slide this other thing underneath.
I say that all the time. It's like this diversion, like, hey, look over here. Well, this is really happening. It's always been that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's super interesting to see what's going to happen. Well, awesome. Can you let listeners know how they can find you, where your podcast is at, anything else you want to share?
For sure. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that greatly. So my podcast, of course, is the Lost Frequency Podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and every major podcast platform. We're really pushing into the YouTube section. So we have our videos, and we're dropping other little things as well. And we do lives, but that's where we can be found. And if anybody has experiences that they want to email us, it's the Lost Frequency Podcast at gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Rye. It was really great to talk to you. Even though this isn't the main focus of my podcast, I love geeking out about this stuff. I love reading about it, talking about it. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone listening, if you like the episode, like, comment, share, subscribe, help spread the word. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.